thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you Understanding Your Dog with Laura Winnie, Education and Community Engagement Coordinator with DuPage County Animal Services. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, Laura.
Thank you. Okay. And Barry, can you hear me okay?
We're good.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have been with the shelter in Wheaton for almost 6 years now, and it has been a whirlwind of learning things. I have had dogs my entire life. Always thought I was pretty good at, knowing what to do when something went wrong, because let's face it, if you have a dog, something's going to go wrong. But since starting at the shelter, I have just learned so much more on anything and everything, not just with dogs, with cats. I do want to give just a little disclaimer here. I am in my office at the moment, which is currently home to 4 foster kittens. So if you hear any screaming during my presentation, probably it's not me, okay? So hopefully they'll be okay and I won't have to duck over and see that they're okay. Hopefully they all got a nice big dinner and they're ready to sleep through this presentation. Who knows? Maybe they'll learn something too. You never know. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So we've broken the presentation down into 4 different categories. So we're going to go all the way back in time and talk about, how we got where we are. We're going to talk about SHED, which is shelter, healthcare, exercise, and diet. So basically those 4 main building blocks for what animals need when they are being cared for by humans. We're going to talk about some humane training techniques that you can utilize at home. And then we'll get into the meat of what everybody is here for, common behavior problems and solutions. Now, there's only so much I can cover in our 45 minutes to an hour here. So I did not cover every single possible thing that could be going sideways with your pets at home. But a lot of these techniques can be used across different types of behaviors. When I'm talking about solutions for a specific problem, it doesn't mean that's the only problem that can use it, right? Okay. But absolutely, I am here to take your questions as well at the end if I did not cover the particular problem that you are encountering. So let's just go from the beginning, because before we get into the specifics, I just want to talk a little bit about where the human dog relationship comes from, and understanding how that has changed over time. So there's a lot of theories on domestication, like even when it happened, how it happened. Um, Recently it was thought that dogs were wild until about 12,000 years ago, but DNA analysis has even shown much, longer time frame up to 150,000 years ago, when wolves started transforming into dogs. So that means that dogs started coming into contact with human society long before we even settled down and started farming or anything like that. So it kind of puts the whole domestication theory of we have farms and settled land, and now we need something to guard it. That theory of domestication is now in dispute, because if they were with us much longer than we actually ever settled down onto land, then why did we have them? So there is a thought that maybe we've been giving ourselves too much credit. Humans tend to do that. We tend to think of ourselves as the, you know, wheeler dealer of all things going on, but we kind of tend to forget the other players in the game. So it's very possible that we did not start the idea of domestication. It's long held theory that, we saw like, oh, an injured baby wolf and brought it in from the cold. And, oh, we realized it was such a wonderful companion. But when you look at the benefits for humans versus the benefits for dogs, I mean, I love my dogs, absolutely. But I gotta say, the dogs get the better end of the deal here, okay? Because yes, I have somebody that will bark at the mailman every single time he shows up, apparently trying to kill me. And I also get somebody to cuddle with, and I go out for walks with, and I get to, you know, play and enjoy their antics with. But for the dogs, it's a lot about survival, right? So they get that food, that shelter, that protection from other animals and also from the elements, in addition to the companionship that we get from them. So it's very possible that dogs kind of figured out, ooh, or wolves figured out, there was like a friendly line of wolves that decided, ooh, these people not so bad. Like, look at all these trash piles they got, or, it's not so bad hanging out with these folks. So, and we can never, of course, negate the possibility of that there was a genetic component to one line of wolves that lent them the ability to let down their guard and come and hang out with us a little bit more to learn about these benefits. Of course, with wildlife, we want them to be cautious of humans. That is how everybody stays happy, healthy, and safe. Okay. So, you really got to think back to, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Was there something going on with these different wolf lines all throughout the world that, they just came across a particularly friendly one or outgoing one or one that was maybe a little bit more on the manipulative side that saw those benefits. So that being said, we have been a major factor in changing from wolf into dog. Okay. And it's not just how they look. All right. Because, there are some dogs that still have a lot of those wolf-like traits. But one of the main things that I want to talk about that really affects us tonight is the ability of dogs to read human gestures and even emotions. Okay. And why that is so important for us today, understanding our dogs, right? There are very few animals in the animal world that when you point at something, they understand what that means. Why your finger is in that shape, gesturing towards something. There aren't a ton of animals that actually understand pointing. Case in point, sorry, that pun was right there. You can point to something for a cat or a rabbit, and they're just gonna be like, all right, well, my human's doing something weird again. Whatever. Okay. So typically a dog is going to be like, what are you talking about? Okay. So this is an amazing ability that they have developed over time, over these thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, to be able to coexist with us so well. And let's not forget, we do play a significant role in the fact that we have bred them for certain things. Okay. So we have selectively bred dogs to be able to look a certain way or to do certain things, be a certain size. Okay. When you think about the domestication of cats, I think the stats something like 95% of cat litters are unplanned. Okay. It's significantly different with dogs because we do have a lot of breeders and people interested in keeping the breeds distinct. Okay. Now, internationally, there are 360 breeds recognized. And that doesn't even necessarily include some of the popular crossbreeds that we think of, like a golden doodle. Okay, a doodle is not necessarily one of that 360, even though it's a very popular one for families and even in like breeding circles. They were mainly bred for specific jobs and these different traits that could be used to complete these dogs. So when you're looking at like AKC, the American Kennel Club, you'll see that they're divided into different groups. So you have a sporting group, a hound group, the terrier group, the herding group, the working group, non-sporting, and toy. Okay. So toy group is typically going to be like those tiny, tiny, tiny little breeds. A lot of times bred for specific companionship, like pug, things like that. Other non-sporting ones may be things that they they are meant to perform certain roles, like a Dalmatian. What a Dalmatian was initially bred to do was to run alongside the horses for the fire departments to keep, animals and crowds away from the horses as they were running to a fire. That's not necessarily a sport, okay? But it is a job. All right. So they fall into all these different little categories here. And a lot of it boils down to, again, using a specific trait and trying to draw that trait out. When you think of like a bloodhound and their amazing ability to track scents, one of my favorite little trivia facts about bloodhounds is it's not even that their nose is so much powerful than other dogs. It is, but it's not like to the degree we would think it is. One of the reasons they're so good at tracking is because of their long floppy ears. As they move, the ears kick up the scent and drive it to the nose. So their whole, like if you're ever wondering, oh my gosh, why does that bloodhound have such big floppy ears and floppy jowls? It's because the waving of that stuff actually kicks up the scent and allows better delivery to the nose. So they're able to utilize their scent markers a lot better. Okay. Now, over many, many years, of course, we've always had to think about um, those dogs that are being bred selectively. But then, of course, there are dogs that are not breeding selectively, right? I mean, accidental litters happen, or you might have, lots of different things going on. So right now we are facing population crises around the United States. We do have lots of different animals entering shelters every single year. The statistic is actually a couple years old. I would have to look it up to see what it compares to right now. And you may not be able to know what kind of breed your dog has. It's famously difficult just to look at a dog and tell what their genetic breed makeup is, because looks are not genetics. Okay. And so, like, you may have, strays coming in and we have absolutely no idea what their background is, or a surrender, like, oh, yeah, I got this puppy from Craigslist, many years ago. And, now I'm moving out of the country and I can't take it with me or whatever. So, when we talk about breed, it's a good place to start, but every dog is going to be individual. And like I said, it can be very difficult just looking at a dog to tell what their genetic makeup is. And I'm sorry, but not every collie turned into a lassie, right? So even if they have that genetic background, doesn't mean they're going to be top of their game, okay? So we really need to come at them from an individual standpoint. And unfortunately, with behavior, a lot of these problems come from when a dog is missing a critical component in its chair. So let's talk very briefly about the things that they need, okay, to have a healthy, happy, fulfilling life. As a way to see, like, okay, is there potentially something that's missing from my dog's life that is causing it to act out or do things that I don't particularly like? Okay. Now, lifespan can vary wildly, all right, amongst breeds. So typically, the larger the dog, the shorter the lifespan is what we're looking at, okay? Some of our little dogs can last well up to 20 years, all right? So, but this is the average. 10 to 13 years is the average, and that's including those big old Great Danes and those tiny little pugs. So that's the average, okay? Now, I will say that probably the care costs that's going to be minimum care costs for the first year and annual care costs. And that is if nothing goes wrong. Veterinarians have a lot of amazing techniques that they can use for making our animals' lives much happier and improve their quality of life. But unfortunately, quality of life does come with a cost. Okay. So, if you're looking at these costs, I will say that that's on the minimum side. Now, energy levels will vary by age and breed. So if you look at this chart that I have on the slide, this kind of gives you an idea of how much time we should be spending having our pets actively engaged. Okay. So, the giant breeds, Great Danes, things like that, they're going to be more on the couch potato end. Okay. So those mastiffs, they're not out there running marathons. So if you look at the bars, it's going to be a minimum and a maximum. So the dark blue bar is the minimum and the light blue bar is the maximum. So even here, the maximum that they recommend for those larger breeds is 60 minutes of activity every single day. Sight hounds, so like greyhounds, things like that, are going to be very similar. Our toy animals, they're going to have about the same minimum, so about that 30 minutes minimum, but they can go a little bit more depending on, again, size, age, things like that. Terriers, as we move up into more of our working dog category, we're going to spend more and more time with them, and they're going to need more and more engagement to help them. Okay, so if you're looking at a higher energy dog, say a husky, a German shepherd, a retriever, lab, something like that, something that was bred to be doing stuff, sheepdogs, cattle dogs, things like that. These animals are going to need not only just physical movement, but also mental stimulation as well. And again, breed is a guide, okay? So each animal's personality is going to be unique, and it's good to check in with your animal on a regular basis just to see how they're doing and make sure that we're not doing too much, but also not too little. Now, for making sure that our animals are nice and comfy, cozy, it is good to have a certain set of things. Bedding, of course, is a nice way to protect joints and things. Laying on a hard floor can cause joint issues later in life. Up here in the cold north, an elevated platform is beneficial for allowing warm air to travel in between the bed and the floor. If your pup's bed is right on the floor, you have the potential of that cold air seeping in right through the bed. So anybody who's ever slept in a sleeping bag on the floor of a campground knows exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so having that little space in between, that air pocket in between, will help to keep your pet warmer and more comfortable. I am a huge advocate for crate training. So crate training is something that you can use to help your pet have its own little safe space. I do have two dogs. They are beagle mixes, and one loves his crate. He loves having a place that he can go to when he's feeling anxious. So for example, like if I'm watching a horror movie and I'm reacting to the horror movie, the first thing he'll do is he'll try to comfort me because he knows that I'm being stressed out by the horror movie. So he'll try to comfort me, and he'll come over and he'll put his paw on my leg. He'll like lean in for pets. And then, of course, I keep watching the horror movie and I keep reacting to it. And he's like, okay, well, to heck with you, lady. What are you doing to yourself? And then he'll leave and go put himself in his crate because he's trying to stay safe from whatever I am reacting to. So he's a very sensitive soul, my Quincy. So I do recommend checking out crate training for that reason. And of course, weather gear and toys. So not just a toy or a specific toy that we leave out all the time, but rotating through toys as well. So different breeds are going to have different needs depending on size, genetic conditions like coat thickness, what are they going to need to be most comfortable in your house. For canine healthcare, it is very, very important that we always check in with a vet at least once a year for a wellness exam. There are lots of medical conditions that can present as behavior problems, okay? And so getting those regular vet visits, a lot of times they can discover ailments even before they become an issue where you're pulling out your hair because they're doing something crazy. Okay, so it is important to be on top of their health care throughout their life and not just visiting the veterinarian when something goes wrong or you notice something. Because just like with human health care, catching stuff earlier often means it's easier to treat. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about some exercise and enrichment options for our pets because it's not just about running for a mile, okay? So let's say you take your dog and you run for a mile. Pretty soon, that's not going to be enough to wear them out anymore, and they're going to run for 2 miles. Or, you're conditioning an athlete is basically what you're doing. And you may not want to be an athlete. You may not, I know, I don't want to run 5 miles every single day. I got other things to do. So it's important to balance that physical exercise with other things that will engage their senses. When I use the term enrichment, it's basically a fancy word that means letting your pet do pet things they enjoy that interest them. Okay. So walks and runs absolutely can be enriching activities, but you don't necessarily need to be, training for a marathon for it to be enriching. For example, you could do something called a sniffy walk or a sniffari. And that is where the goal is not how far you go. Okay. The goal there is to let your dog have the choices of sniffing that single blade of grass for as long as they want to. Because even just the act of sniffing is engaging their brain because they're analyzing all those smells that we can't perceive at all. Okay. So when I take my dogs out for a walk versus when my husband takes them out for a run, a lot of times the dogs are actually a little bit more tired after their sniffari with me than with the run with him because they were moving their bodies, but they were also using their minds. If you can think all the way back to school, exam days or state testing days, how exhausted we all were at the end of those because our brains were engaged so intensely the entire time. It's kind of like that. So, puzzle bowls and toys are a great way to engage pets instead of just having kibble out, an easy thing that they do. Foraging. So, where they actually have to go and find their food. We just play hide and seek with kibble in my house. And then sometimes I'll even literally set it up like Pac-Man so that my dog, and yes, I do play the Pac-Man theme song behind the scenes because I'm a nerd, but lots of different things like that. Or, tossing it so that they have to go find it. Even using the backyard if you have space like that available, putting treats like underneath pieces of paper in the house so they have to find it, rolling up treats inside a towel so they have to figure out how to unroll the towel to get to the treats is a fabulous way to do that as well. And of course, one of the greatest ways to engage our animals' brains is by training, teaching them new things. 100%, you can teach dogs to do new things. My dogs are 9.5 years old, and I just taught my one dog who goes out with me to schools how to present his belly for belly rubs at the schools, because that is one of his favorite things with the kids is to get belly rubs. But he's sometimes he's not sure when he's supposed to do that. So we've been working on a cue for him to present belly, and that has been super fun, and the kids loved it. Now, I do have some examples from the shelter here. Now, you can buy things that help with enrichment. So in this first little video here, we just have a simple puzzle bowl. Okay, so the dog here has to figure out how to get the food out from in between all these little nooks and crevices. But you can also just make something on your own. So with this Roddy here, we have an egg carton, something that he can rip up and destroy. You can use this with paper towel tubes, toilet paper tubes. Even if you go to McDonald's and you have the bag left over, all those fun smells inside the bag, throw some kibble in, let them destroy it. Give them an outlet for that chewing instinct that's not going to drive you crazy. Now, of course, when we are doing training and things like that, we do want to pay attention to the animal's diet so that they are getting everything that they need. Since dogs are not true carnivores, they're an omnivore, and it's studies have shown that they're more like opportunists and scavengers when it comes out in the wild, not necessarily hunting, but just taking whatever they can find. It is important to talk to your veterinarian about what the different options are. There are lots of different diet fads out there, and just like for people diet fads, we're not sure which ones will actually hold up to scientific testings and which ones won't at the moment. So there's lots of different things out there that I would talk to your veterinarian about. And anytime we are using food as a way to motivate our animals, we do have to keep in mind that it's all part of their daily calorie intake, and how do we balance that? So for example, when I take my dog Cooper to the schools with me to meet the kids, he gets a really small breakfast, and then I use part of his breakfast kibble as the reward when we're interacting with the kids. Okay. So that is one way that I mitigate him not getting too many treats in a day. Not only do I not want him to throw up in the car on the way home, but I also just don't want to give lean into any of those bad habits. Okay. Um, so absolutely check with your veterinarian and making sure that, a lot of those processed foods that we eat may not be the best for them. So, thinking about things that, absolutely our dogs beg for, but are probably not even super healthy for us to be eating. Hot dogs, I'm looking at you. I love you, but man, definitely limited or, absolutely not at all. Or like for those very, very high reward moments when we want something extra special on a limited basis. So again, talk to your veterinarian if you have any concerns about that. So let's talk about some humane training options that we have available to us if we encounter a behavior problem. Okay. So whether this is a new behavior issue that or an ongoing one, the way to tackle it is going to be to make sure that we're trying to understand where the behavior is coming from, and then what can we do to ask for the correct behavior instead. So, one thing I really want to talk about before we actually talk about modifying behavior is there is a prevalent theory of training. Mostly it's with dogs, but sometimes it's applied to other animals, and it's called the dominance theory. You may be familiar with it. It's this idea that the dogs in your house are in a pack structure, and you need to be the alpha. You need to be the head of the pack. You control the resources, and they need to respect your authority. Okay. And the idea here is that this is how dogs naturally want to live in this hierarchy because it goes back to their wolf ancestors. The problem with this theory is it's all based on really, really bad science. It originates from a study in 1947 on captive wolves. Okay. And I, I never visited a zoo in 1947, but I've seen the pictures, and basically it's a concrete box. Okay. And the wolves in particular that were studied were all strangers. They were all random juveniles that had been pulled from the wild and thrown into this concrete box together. And then a scientist watched them to see what happened. The human equivalent that I can come up with is if somebody turned on like a reality TV show like Big Brother or The Jersey Shore or something like that, and watched it and then formulated a hypothesis on all of human behavior based on a bunch of strangers on a reality show like Survivor, okay, and how they're fighting for resources and all this stuff. I don't know about you, but my daily life does not look like Survivor or Big Brother, uh, really at all. It's a lot more boring compared to that, which is why I'm not on TV. But it's not going to give us the best idea of how to function in society if that's how we're basing all of our interactions with our coworkers, with our family members, based on those reality TV shows. Okay. So besides the fact that it's bad science, um, also remember what we talked about before, how, there is probably a genetic component of a particular strand of wolves or something that allowed them to cohabitate with us in the beginning. All right. That allowed for this start of a relationship. And the wolves that are there now probably don't have that. Okay. I would never recommend somebody go out into the woods, find a wolf puppy, and bring it home and assume it's going to be the same thing. Okay. Dogs are dogs, wolves are wolves. It has changed significantly over those thousands of, not hundreds of thousands of years. So when they repeated the study, getting rid of all of these false barriers. So when they had wolves in a natural setting with their natural family group, they noticed something. The scientists noticed that the wolves tended to act more like a family. So those who had specialized knowledge about certain things tended to be the ones taking charge, kind of like in our homes today, right? Mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, whoever has the knowledge on how to do something. They're the ones directing everybody else how to do something. Okay. And then if somebody else has some expertise in an area, then they become the leader. It's very fluid, right? Depending on the situation, depending on who's around, depending what needs to be done. Okay. So a lot of times dogs base their experience with the relationships based on the individual's comfort level, their their own personal experiences, kind of like how we do in our society today. Okay, so this is something really important to keep in mind because you do not need to use fear-based corrections to scare your dog straight, to punish them if they, get out of line or something like that. You don't need to be this big, strong, cartoonish alpha that everybody is terrified of. Okay. So any method of training that encourages using fear or pain or anything like that is probably taking its cue from the dominance theory that, we need to show them who's boss kind of thing. On the other side of this is called Lima training, least intrusive, minimally aversive. Okay. And think about like when you're talking to your kids, okay, and we want them to do something. The first thing we do is we ask nicely. All right. And then, we might have to ask nicely again. And then we might escalate a little bit, right? We might get our parent voice going. Like, hey, you better do this. I asked you to do this. You better do this. Okay. And then if that doesn't work, maybe there's some consequences that we talk about with, hey, if you don't do this by this point, this is what's going to happen. Okay. So we start out with least intrusive, right? We don't immediately start with, all right, your butt is grounded for 3 weeks because 2 minutes ago I wanted this done. No, that is an overreaction. We start with the, hey, can you do this, please? Oh, you did it. Wonderful. We start with the least intrusive, the minimally aversive. Okay. So with this kind of training, we focus on the physical well-being. We focus on the animal's environment, making sure that they're set up for success. Okay. We redirect them to the behavior that we want to see. And if the behavior is caused by a fear or another negative emotion, then we're working with the dog to counter those emotions, okay, to change the initial reaction to stuff. So what tools can we use? Treats are a great one. All right. And a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, Laura, do I have to bribe my dog to do something every single time? No, but I love my job. I love it. Wouldn't want to do anything else in the world. Would I be here with you all tonight if I wasn't getting paid for it? Nope. Think of it not as a bribe. Think of it as payment for services rendered. You are asking them to do something they do not want to do. So you are rewarding them, paying them with something that they enjoy. Okay. I am here instead of out by my campfire reading a book. And at the end of the week, I will get a nice little paycheck to reward me for doing that particular behavior. Kind of that idea. Okay. When we are thinking about the equipment we use, so harnesses, collars, things like that, we do want to avoid anything that causes fear or pain. And instead, we want to use items that guide or limit the behavior humanely. All right. So martingale collars are a good example of that. It's a regular collar with an extra loop. So when the loop is pulled, it tightens, but it's not meant to choke or cause distress. It's just to get the animal's attention. Now, one thing you may have heard with positive reinforcement training is reward what you want, ignore what you don't. Yes and no, because you really need to be consistent with that ignoring, and it really only works if what they want is your attention. Okay. So for example, jumping up. Maybe your dog jumps up on you when you come in the house because they want your attention. But jumping up is also a fun thing to do. Okay. Now, when a dog is like, for instance, barking out the window, screaming at things is super fun. So if you ignore that, they're just going to self-reward because they're doing the thing that they enjoy anyway. So the key there is to figure out Why does your dog enjoy doing that particular behavior? What are they getting out of it? Because they're not going to keep doing it if it's not fun for them or, provides them some sort of reward. Okay. You can use management to prevent that behavior. So, for example, if your dog tends to bark when he sees people walking on the sidewalk, you can put blinds up so that they can't see. Okay. Now, you could also ask them for an alternative behavior and then reward them when they choose wisely. All right. So, for example, if a dog is jumping up on you when you get home, you ignore the jumping, but you ask for a sit. And then when they give you that sit or that 4 feet on the floor, then you can reward them with the attention that they wanted in the first place, or with a different type of reward, depending on what they're seeking there. So management is different from dog training because you're not trying to teach the animal anything. You're mostly just trying to prevent them from doing the bad behavior in the first place. So you're controlling the environment. Nothing's being learned. All right. But practice can make permanent. So the more that a dog gets to practice an unwanted behavior, the more it cements in their brain that this is acceptable and this is okay. So by managing the environment so that they cannot complete the behavior, then that helps set them up for success because they don't get to reinforce it within themselves. So a couple of examples, let's say you have dogs that resource guard from each other. They get really particular about certain toys or food or anything like that. You may separate them and have them in different rooms. Okay, so that there's not that competition right next to each other. Reactivity at the windows, we talked about that one. If they are scared of new places, first we start off by staying at home and getting to the foundation of where that fear is coming from. If they're resource guarding from us, if they get really upset when we go and grab something from them, we leave their stuff alone for the first part so that they don't see us as a constant threat to the stuff that they feel strongly about. Okay. So I have beagles. And anybody who knows anything about scent hounds knows that how food motivated they are. They absolutely love, 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 love food. And my one beagle, he just loves to be right underfoot when I'm cooking anything. Okay. Most of the time it's not a problem. He's pretty good at reading my body language to figure out when I'm moving and he'll move out of the way, but not always. And especially like, let's say we have a couple of people over and we're all helping to prep dinner together, that is a recipe for a trip hazard. Okay. So in those instances, I tend to put up a baby gate so that he can't come into the kitchen. And he's not learning not to be in the kitchen during food prep time. He's just being prevented from doing it. I could go further if I wanted to. I could train him that he needs to be in his crate anytime that we're meal prepping. But for me, it works. For me, it works just to put up that baby gate when I need to, when there are multiple people in the kitchen. If at any point I have like an injury or mobility problem where it's going to become more of a hazard to have him underfoot, then I may take it to that next step. But for a lot of us, management may be all you need to do to get that unwanted behavior to stop. Okay. And that's perfectly fine. If you don't want to take it to the next level to change your dog's mind about how awesome this one particular unwanted behavior is, that's perfectly fine. You need to find the balance that's good for your household, but just know that management will fail if you forget to use it, right? Or if, like somebody comes through the kitchen and opens the baby gate and then doesn't close it again or something like that. That's the hazard with management, is that human error can make it a little bit more difficult to work with. Okay, let's dive into the meat of some of our common issues that we see with dogs and what to do about it. So it's important to rule out any underlying causes. Okay, so if we have a new behavior, it's just started. First thing we want to do is we want to get them checked out by a veterinarian because, as I said, a lot of behavior changes can be caused by medical concerns. There could be pain issues going on that is causing them to act in a different manner, all sorts of things like that. Environmental changes absolutely can be a big factor. One story I heard from a trainer that I know was they had a dog client who became very fearful in the household, was constantly hiding, was peeing in the corners, was just absolutely terrified. But when they left the house, the dog returned back to normal and relaxed and was its normal self out on the walks. But the second they came back home, the dog was fearful again. And the owners really couldn't figure out what was going on. So, she came over and they started doing an assessment on different changes. Well, it turns out that the homeowners had installed one of those like pulse preventatives for moles and voles, where it actually sends like oh gosh, I'm like the sonar into the soil to prevent small rodents from digging into the soil. And she's like, "Oh, well, when did you buy that? When did you start that?" And it turns out that that was right around the same time that the dog's behavior issue started. So the owner in the moment went and turned it off, and you could see the dog visibly relax. So the dog was reacting to something that the people didn't have any perception of at all. Okay. So something like that could be a factor as well. Or social changes. All right. So for one example, when I have my two dogs, when one of them who is very, very active, very athletic, if he has an injury and I have to prevent him from playing, because we don't want to exacerbate his injury, his brother does enjoy playing, not as much, but does enjoy playing, it could get very tense between the two dogs because the one wants to play but isn't allowed to, and the other wants to play and is allowed to. And so that social dynamic change can make things very tense between the two dogs, and even cause some aggressive behaviors between them. So that's something that we've really struggled with over the past couple of years as our dogs have gotten older and had a couple more health issues, that we really need to be cognizant of finding alternatives so that everybody can get along in the home. Now, if you are bringing in a new pet into your home, keep in mind that they will need time to adjust. The common thing is the 3-3-3 rule. So 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. 3 days, everything is new, everything is stressful. They're probably not going to show you parts of their true personality at all as they figure out routines and all that kind of thing. 3 weeks, you might see some new behaviors cropping up that you didn't see before as they become more comfortable with you. Any classroom teachers, same thing we see with kids in a classroom, right? Or, with a new employee at your job, probably the first couple days they're on their best behavior. And then maybe they get a little sarcastic into that third week or something. Kind of the same thing with our pets. As they become more comfortable, as they feel set in their routine, maybe some of those naughty behaviors are going to slip out a little bit. And then by that 3-month rule, 3-month deadline, we're seeing animals that are much more confident. They're set in those routines. So any behaviors that we're seeing there that we don't like are probably things that need to be worked on. They're not part of this transitional stress that we saw with them coming into the home. So you may see a couple of different types of behaviors that are just kind of lumped under aggressive. And this could be, between dogs, could be from a dog to another person or another animal. It could be a territorial situation. They feel very strongly about a thing, a person, a space, and they don't want anybody else messing with it. It could be redirected aggression. So that means something over here bothered them an hour ago, and it's been stressing them out this entire hour, and they kind of snap. Okay. So think of it like, having a really, really, really bad day at work, and you go home, and I'll throw my husband under the bus. Husband, forgot to unload the dishwasher. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. A little bit of an overreaction for an not an unloaded dishwasher, right? But it's because I had such a bad day, and it's just like, oh, the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay. So that can absolutely help happen with our pets as well. Now, some aggressive behaviors that we see are actually misinterpreted play signals. So it is very important that if you're noticing aggression between animals, are they both engaging? Do they take breaks? That's a sign of play. Okay. So when it's one dog constantly doing the chasing or the pouncing or whatever, that's a little bit more concerning. But if they're taking turns or they're taking breaks, that's going to be more of a play behavior. And unfortunately, we often misinterpret aggression when it's fear-based. Okay. So it's important to understand what is motivating that behavior. All right. So it could be a person or an animal. It could be a location. It could be a sound. It could be a smell that is causing the animal to become very fearful. Could be a, a negative association with one of those things where they have history in their past that triggers that. So you can take a look at some of this body language here where, we may see it as aggression, but really it's just they're trying to defend themselves against whatever scary threat you're seeing. And especially when you see that tail tucked and, their head ducked low, things like that, that's more of that fear or defensive threat versus an aggressive act. For reactivity, we might see some of these aggressive behaviors with reactivity. So leash or barrier. So barrier meaning like at a fence line. Okay. It could be anxiety based, like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared and nervous. Well, could be defensive, right? That I'm going to protect myself against this threat. It could also be frustration. Oh my gosh, I really want to play with this dog and I can't because I'm on a leash. All right. So we need to figure out what the body language is to figure out what is causing that reaction on the leash or at the fence line. We can play the look at that game, which we'll talk about in just a second. We can also teach our animals the emergency U-turn. I love this because sometimes when an animal is on a leash, they feel trapped. They're anchored to somebody who can at best run 3 miles an hour. Or, I mean, like, it's a little scary right there. Okay. So they can feel really trapped when on leash. And so this emergency U-turn gives them this idea, like if they're scared, they can check in with me and we could go the other way. So how you work on this is similar to how we work on loose leash walking, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's basically the idea of having the pet check in with you and changing direction away from where you're going. So you can use, different cues for that. We use the word fall back. So when I tell my dog fall back, he looks at me to see which way I'm going to go next. And that's something that you can work on. Now, the look at that game, we'll see a little video here. This is the idea that, especially for fear-based reactions, the idea that just because we see something that's scary doesn't mean we need to be afraid of it. So here in the video, you're going to see that this dog and trainer are working at the park for dog reactivity. So you want to start at a distance where they're comfortable, because if they're already flipping their lid, you're not going to get any learning in, okay? So what we do is when they look at the thing but don't react to it, reward them. And how we do that is we click. So we use a clicker to redraw their attention back to you. And if you don't, just lure them back so they're paying attention to you. Eventually, this gets them in the mindset of, oh, actually, that scary thing, it's not as scary because it means I get good things. Okay, so the look at that game can be used for lots of different things for fear-based behavior. Now, if we have animals, if we have dogs, especially that are humping or jumping up, it's probably not exactly what you're thinking of there. It's not like a dominance thing. It's not a social hierarchy. It's not necessarily an aggressive thing. A lot of times it's a reaction to anxiety, okay? Or they have extra energy, or it's just inappropriate play. All right. So, think about that little kid in preschool who was always going up and hugging every single person, regardless of if people wanted to be hugged or not. Kind of the same thing here, right? They're just like, oh, I know that this is a fun thing to do and I'm just going to do it because I can. Okay. So a lot of times, yeah, it's just inappropriate play, or they're doing it because it does feel good. All right. And they need to learn when it's appropriate to do things or not. Now, when you have a humper and humpy situation where you everybody seems to be fine with it, like for example what's going on in this fun little picture here, then you don't necessarily need to intervene. But if like the humpy is very uncomfortable and showing signs of anxiety or like trying to get away from the situation, then that's where we want to start redirecting. All right. So anytime we see that start of the behavior, you want to ask them to do something else instead. Okay. So this is where knowing your dog and knowing the things that they enjoy doing can be particularly helpful. All right. Now, since it is a sign of like excess energy, this is where, like, when you have a dog that's overly tired, think about a toddler that needs a nap and they have like full on breakdown mode. They're not quite sure what to do with these emotions. So when a dog starts to hump, like say at the end of a time at the dog park, this might be a sign that your dog has been overly stimulated. They have too many feelings going on. They don't know the appropriate outlet for it. Might be a sign that it's time to head back home and have a nice quiet activity instead, that they can do. Jumping up can be just because it's really fun to jump up. It's very exciting for them. It can be greeting, can be anxiety. What's the easiest way to redirect this behavior is to ask for something that they can't do while jumping, which is to sit or have all four on the floor. And then once they are doing that, then we reward them. Now, I will say that this is very difficult if your dog has a tendency to jump on strangers, or on people that are coming over to your house, like friends and family. So many times I've had friends and family go, "Oh, it's okay. He can jump on me." I'm like, "No, no, we don't want him to practice it." So it's very important to communicate with your guests what you are doing, to make sure that they're not encouraging the bad behavior, so that they know the routine when they come in the door. So again, we don't get practice makes permanent. Now, for leash manners, uh, most dogs are not going to understand what we want them to do on a loose leash. They are just thinking that you're slow and being slow for no good reason. And why are you being so rude on this leash? We got to get to all the things. So the main goal is we want them to check in with us. Okay. Reward them for eye contact or being near you. You can change directions and reward them when they follow. And you can use tools that help to guide. So front clipping harnesses are a great thing because they're not going to sled dog you down the street. Okay. Or even head leads, but be gentle. We don't tug on those really hard because that can cause injury. And thinking about the purpose of the walk. For us, it's physical enrichment. It's moving around. It's seeing the sights. For dogs, it's the mental stuff, right? That sniffari, walking, catching all those smells. So let's take a look at a video of some loose leash training here. Now, the only thing that I would change up with what this trainer is doing is every single time the dog becomes even, I would offer a reward of some kind. Okay. But you'll notice that after changing direction multiple times, the dog is closer and checks in faster with the person on the leash, right? And they're not pulling ahead as fast because they're learning that the purpose is, oh, I need to be aware of what we're doing. Okay. For barking, lots of things can cause barking. It can just be, food motivated. Hey, lady, get me my food.
Laura, you froze. I don't know if you're having trouble with your internet connection.
We want to make sure that we manage the environment there, to prevent them from having access to that. Okay. We want to see what is triggering, what's motivating this, and ask for other behaviors. Fun fact, dogs cannot bark while they are sniffing. So if you have a treat in your hand that they are sniffing, it will automatically make them quiet. And then you can open the hand to reward them for that quiet time. What I like to do with my dogs is when they alert me to a stranger outside, I thank them and reward them after the first bark. And then after that, I don't give anything. Okay. And it's become a lot easier because once my dogs know that I have acknowledged that something is happening, they stop. So that has worked out well because I do want to know when things are moving around outside. I do want to know if the mailman is a serial killer coming to get me. I just don't want to be told 5,000 times in a row that that's what's happening. So my dogs have figured out that once I acknowledge them, that's good. We don't need to go on. And I don't yell or anything like that because then they'll just think I'm agreeing with them. Like, yeah, absolutely. That guy sucks. All right. No, I say, okay, thank you. thank you. And then it stops it. Like I acknowledged what's going on and we're good to go. Now, one of the last ones we're going to talk about here is, or the last one we'll talk about is resource guarding. Now, I don't know about you, but if I found a coworker going through my purse or my desk drawers at work, I would get a little grumpy too. We have this idea of protecting our space and our stuff and our food. I got annoyed when my husband took the last cookie last week. Okay. So nobody questions it when we have a sense of ownership, but we tend to get a little upset when our dogs have a sense of ownership. So what we need to do is teach them that we are not a threat, a big meanie, a big thief. So what we can do is trade. We can trade. So we can teach to drop it or leave it with the expectation that they'll get rewarded for like that counterintuitive thing we want them to do. We could manage the environment so that they feel separated. So crate training is good, or we just leave their stuff alone. Okay. We teach people in our family, like, oh, yeah, he's very particular about his stuffy. We just don't touch his stuffy or something like that. Okay. So lots of different things that you can do there. And this is the idea of getting rid of the emotions behind it. One of the techniques that I've used in the past is if a dog growls while they're eating when I come by, I don't take the food from them because that it forces that I'm a horrible person and they were right to be worried about me. Instead, I drop a little treat in the bowl as I walk by so that every time I walk by, I'm not taking things away. I'm actually giving them more joy. Okay. So thinking about, okay, why is my dog acting this way and what can I do to counter that emotion is going to be key for a lot of these behavior issues. Now, obviously, you may have some problems, some behavior issues that are just beyond the scope of this particular training, and that is perfectly fine. I understand. Highly recommend reaching out to different professionals and those who focus on positive reinforcement training. So certified trainers a lot of times do new behaviors and specialize in like, the basic or advanced obedience. They may even do like sporting or working dog specific like agility, things like that. Behavior consultants are the next level up. So they'll focus on more complex or complicated issues like separation anxiety. Okay, something like that. And then veterinarian behaviorists are at the top of the list because they are also combining medical interventions with a lot of this behavior training. So for I think all of Chicagoland, there's like 2 veterinarian behaviorists in all of Chicagoland. So that tells you how specialized they are. But you can start out with your veterinarian and get their recommendations on who they have had experience with. And there are also certification sites that can lead you to wonderful trainers in the area to work with. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate it. I will hang out here for a couple of questions, but if you come up with something, in the middle of the night that you wished you would ask, don't call me, but you can send me an email to humane.education@dupagecounty.gov. We are the county's resource for animals, so please reach out to us if you are having any problems. If we cannot help with your problem, we can redirect you to somebody who can give you a little bit more information. Okay. All right. Thank you. Barry, do we have any questions?
Thank you again, Laura. This has been great, and there are one or two questions. And just a reminder, if you have a question, please go ahead and type that into the Q&A, and we'll get those answered. Someone says, my rescue was extremely shy, anxious, scared when I adopted her at age 3. Once she settled in, she became an aggressive toy destroyer, only squeaky toys 2 to 3 times a week for 2 to 3 years. Then she suddenly stopped. She spends a lot of time outside and still engages with long-term chews, but no longer has any interest in destroying toys. Is it possible that the toy destruction was anxiety related?
So absolutely, it could be. It could also just be a phase. Dogs go through phases of development just like humans do. So it may be that whatever benefit they were getting from that destructive behavior, they grew out of. So there are lots of anxiety-based behaviors that can be a little confusing. One of the more common ones that I've seen is licking. So either licking surfaces, licking other animals, or licking themselves as a self-soothing behavior. I have not specifically heard of destructive chewing as an anxiety-based behavior, but I would not negate it based on what I know. Um, I'm so glad that your dog feels more comfortable and that it's come out of its shell over all of these years. You can also just try engaging them. Maybe they got bored with the particular type of squeaker toys that were being presented. As I mentioned before, changing out the toys that are available on any given day can often pique their curiosity. Um, and maybe it's just a developmental phase that they went through and now they've matured and moved on to something else. So, um, I, as long as they're not participating in any destructive behaviors otherwise or any self-destructive behaviors, I wouldn't see it as a concerning sign. But you're absolutely right. It could have been a sign of anxiety, but also have just been a phase.
Okay, thank you. Can you go over quickly again what the best way would be to stop dogs from jumping on visitors?
Absolutely. So first off, we want to make sure that the visitors know what the game plan is, okay, and that they are on board. Because I have a brother that anybody who has a brother knows, who refuses to follow my training plan. So my dogs still jump up, unfortunately. So you need to know what the plan is. Um, if they are jumping up to get attention, if that is what they're seeking, engagement, that is where the art of ignoring really comes into play. And that means complete ignore. Okay. So no eye contact, no touching, no engagement of any kind. And then you calmly ask them to do a different behavior like sit. And then once they do that sit, then you engage with them. Okay, so that is one of the more common methods for working with a dog that is jumping up constantly is again, ignoring that bad behavior until they give you what you want. But don't forget to ask for the behavior you want. Okay, that is going to be the key. And then even having somebody that might have the dog on a leash because they're going to screw up at first, right? That can then gently redirect, have them sit maybe on the other side of the room. Once they're sitting nicely, then have the visitor approach. That's going to help your dog understand, oh, okay, I only get this attention I want when all four of my feet are on the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Someone asks, curious, when my dog turns in circles, vigorously paws the carpet, then may not even lay down to rest in that spot.
That's a good one. That one I'm not familiar with, except it's possible that it's more of a scent marking behavior. Despite popular belief, animals do sweat and they sweat through their paw pads. So they may actually be using that sweat to mark a particular behavior, to mark a particular spot. But that one I'm not sure about. I would check in with a trainer. Now, if they're not like showing any signs of anxiety or destructive behavior or anything like that, might just be a little quirk, right? Like for anybody who watched The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon in his spot, something like that. Animals can be socially awkward as well, just as humans can. And one of the reasons we love them is because they have these little quirks. So that would be my professional guesstimate on what it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you. Someone asks, what should I do if my dog barks at nothing?
But how do you know it's nothing? That's my question. Some dogs can hear up to half a mile away. They can smell things like changes in emotion. So, unfortunately, we'll never ever be able to know exactly how our pets perceive the world because our senses are so limited compared to theirs. So, one of the things that we utilize at the shelter to help with anxiety barking is we will use like mood music to help, or like white noise to drown out ambient noises from the rest of the shelter so that the dogs can relax. Now, you don't want to have it on 24/7, but let's say you notice a pattern in when the barking starts. For example, maybe it happens, sometimes in the afternoons. For all you know, there are children 3 blocks over screaming because they just got out of school, and your dog can hear it and it's distressing to them. Or he's really excited and he wants to go play with the kids, and so he's barking to let them know. By putting on some white noise, it may drown out that sound that you can't even hear. Now, again, you don't want to have that sound going 24/7 because then it's going to get pretty irritating, but you could use it during those times of day when you notice it more frequently than others. And again, rewarding for silence or rewarding after a single bark to teach the dog that, yeah, okay, we appreciate the one. And then we're good. We don't need 50 warning barks. Thank you very much.
Okay, here's another barking question. Someone says, our Sheltie is a barker, but this is a trait of the breed. Is it something that needs to be controlled or just accepted?
I mean, honestly, it depends on how irritating it is for you. Everybody's going to have their own personal tolerance for what they can put up with in their home. My favorite trick is the teaching the 1 or 2 barks is acceptable, and then beyond that, please knock it off. And going from there. But it's all about how much effort you're willing to put into it. And again, if it's not disturbing your household, then a lot of times, yeah, we're just going to put up with these little quirks and be like, yeah, okay, that's just a thing they do, right? Just like when my dog stares at me while I'm eating pizza and drool is coming out of his mouth. That's a thing beagles do, and that's just something I accept about them.
Okay, it's funny that you mentioned staring because the next question says, our boxer is much more interested in people and other dogs to hang out with versus treats on our walks. So she sits and stares as other dog walkers go by. Any tips to help prevent the stare down or how to redirect?
Oh, that's a good one. Unfortunately, that is not within my wheelhouse. Um, what I would recommend is if you have anybody, what I would try is if you have somebody that you can parallel walk with, maybe a neighbor or somebody with a dog that is comfortable, you could try doing that and then changing direction so that your dog has that companionship available to them on the walk. And then the idea that that emergency U-turn, right? So that we're not allowing them to stare. So switching directions even momentarily so that their focus is back on you versus whatever else is going on in the environment. Those would be my go-tos first. But if it is becoming a problem where he's making other people or other dogs anxious, I would check in with the trainer to see if they have any other tips or tricks.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll take just 1 or 2 more questions.
Sure.
Next one is our Beagle mix gets very sad when we go out for an errand and she has to stay home. Any thoughts on how to reassure her? Would another dog help? She never destroys anything. She's just sad.
Okay. I would be curious what that sad behavior looks like. Like, are they sleeping? Are they pacing? What is that? Beagles are a breed that is prone to separation anxiety. Uh, One of my dogs actually has it. So if that's the case, if it's a little bit of separation anxiety, if you have a long-lasting activity that they can do while you're gone, that you reserve specifically for when you're gone, for example, a licky mat or a Kong, especially a frozen one that's going to take them a little bit longer for them to engage in. Like I said, licking is a self-soothing technique, so it generally will help to boost endorphins and make the pet feel better. I would start with that. And I wouldn't only bring it out when you're going to be gone for 5 hours. I would bring it out sporadically so that they're not like, okay, the Kong's out. That means I'm going to be alone for the whole rest of the day. Like, no, like, oh, the Kong's out. I get to do something. And then before they know it, you're back. Something like that. We want to try to avoid creating recognition of patterns like that for our pets so they don't anticipate being lonely if possible. Adding another dog to your household is always an option. They are, social animals, but it's also another animal. So there are other interesting things that you can do to get them nice and tired before you head out. I would check into like foraging and puzzle work and things like that as well to do while you're in the house so that they're a little bit more tuckered out when you leave.
Okay, great. I think maybe we'll take this one as the last question. Someone asks, why are choke collars still around, or even collars in general? Person says, I think harnesses would be the only thing used.
So
What's your opinion?
unfortunately with choke collars, shock collars, prong collars, things like that, they get a lot of short-term results. Okay. And some people, even professional trainers, see the short-term results and go, woohoo, we fixed it. And because it's preventing the dog from doing the behavior in the moment. The major problem with prong and choke collars is that they're not changing the animal's emotions about what's going on around them. It's not teaching them what to do instead. And actually, it's adding another layer of fear, pain, discomfort to a situation that they are already showing discomfort. Okay. So we're adding long-term problems. But what people are seeing is that short-term fix, and they're thinking that that's all they need. So that's the unfortunate legacy of the prong collars and the choke collars.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. We really appreciate your time and all your expertise in answering so many of our questions. We did have the privilege of recording tonight's program. So if you registered, you will receive a follow-up email from me with that link to the survey, and then some other great resources in it. And then you'll receive a second follow-up email from me in just a couple of days once we've had a chance to edit down the recording. And that will give you the direct link to that recording for you to watch again or share with others. But with that, I think we'll say good night. Thanks again, Lauren. And
All right. Thank you so much, Barry.
yeah, take care, everyone. See you soon.